A big thank you to my incredible viewers for this video suggestion. If you have a video idea, submit it to the Google Forms link in the description. Australian theme park lore. There's a lot of it, and some of it is pretty obscure. In today's video, we're diving into an iceberg of Australian theme parks. From defunct attractions and forgotten rides to strange facts, incidents, mysteries, and pieces of forgotten history. We're diving from the surface down to the depths to discover things about Australian theme parks that you maybe didn't know. I'll be upfront and say I suck at ordering iceberg charts. I have no idea how I'm supposed to judge what other people will find obscure and what's known to most people and what's not. So please don't judge the tiers too much. I probably got them wrong. I tried my best, but it's probably out of order. We're going to start on the surface level with things that I think most enthusiasts or theme park fans would probably know, but might be less familiar to the general public, and then move all the way down to the depths to obscure facts that most people probably never knew. I want to give a shout out to OzCoasters on Instagram who actually sent through their own Aussie theme parks iceberg chart to help out with this video. Go and give them a follow. Without further ado, let's start at the tip of the iceberg on the surface level. Big Buzz Fun Park. Big Buzz is the first of two parks that I decided to include on the surface level because I've literally never heard anyone talk about them, despite the fact that they actually still exist and are open to the public. Big Buzz is located at Rainbow Flat to the north of Forster Tuncurry and features mini golf go-karts, a giant slide, laser tag, water slides, and an alpine slide. The park opened in 1984, so it's been around for quite some time. However, it is a little pricey for what it offers, with adult tickets starting at $55. Still, if you're on a beach holiday to Forster, it's worth noting that there actually is a very little known amusement park just up the road. Gumbaya Park. Before Gumbaya World became the very high quality theme park that it is today, the park operated from 1978 to 2016 as Gumbaya Park, and it was a very different place to what it is today. The park originated as a pheasant farm and evolved to include basic attractions like wildlife, go-karts, and an alpine slide. The development into Gumbaya World began in 2016 when the park was sold to a group of investors who want to turn the park into a full theme park destination. What's interesting about the Gumbaya Park days and why I thought it was worthy of inclusion on this iceberg is that the alpine slide and go-kart track still exist today. The modern day Gumbaya World is quite literally standing right next to the decaying remains of the former Gumbaya Park. The remains of the rides are located in bushland and storage areas behind the park that are only accessible to park staff, so unfortunately, it's not accessible to the public. Luna Park and Magic Mountain, Glenelg. Glenelg Beach in Adelaide is currently home to a family entertainment centre called the Beach House. This indoor amusement venue stands on the former grounds of two previous Adelaide amusement parks. The area surrounding the Beach House was home to Luna Park Glenelg from 1930 to 1934, established by Herman Phillips. This park was the predecessor to Luna Park Sydney, featuring the majority of the same opening day attractions, including the original Big Dipper, Ghost Train, and River Caves. The rides were relocated to Milsons Point in Sydney after disputes with the local council over rent and operations. Years later, in 1982, the former grounds of Luna Park would become home to Magic Mountain. This was a multi-story amusement centre with water slides, rides, and arcade games that was built inside a mountain which locals likened to a giant dog turd. Magic Mountain was demolished in 2004 as part of a council plan to open more green space on the Glenelg waterfront and was replaced in 2006 with the Beach House, an upgraded and much less ugly family entertainment centre. Magic Mountain, Nobby Beach. Opening in 1962, Magic Mountain in Nobby Beach was the original Gold Coast theme park. It originally opened as a simple chairlift ride to the top of a large rocky outcrop that overlooks the surrounding beaches and suburbs. A cafeteria was built at the top of the mountain, which expanded after the chairlift attraction proved incredibly popular to include rides and shows. Some of the famous attractions included a wave swinger, a parachute drop tower, and a replica castle. Increased competition from SeaWorld and Dreamworld would lead to Magic Mountain's closure in 1987. It would remain derelict and abandoned until 1991, when the land was subdivided. Today, it is now the site of a series of apartments named Magic Mountain Resort Apartments, as well as restaurants and shops. The chairlift was relocated to Dreamworld, where it operated as the Skylink chairlift from 1989 to 2005. The parachute drop tower was also relocated, operating at Wonderland Sydney. Orphan Rocker. Orphan Rocker was an attempted in-house roller coaster project by Scenic World founder Harry Hammond. Construction on the ride began in 1984, originally as a scenic monorail ride which gradually evolved into a thrilling roller coaster. It was supposed to feature rocking cars and a lengthy layout that wove through the bush below the park entrance, eventually swooping down into a bank turn over the edge of the 200-meter cliffs of Katoomba. Ultimately, the ride never opened to the public and has remained partially standing but not completed ever since. The official reasoning was that the park felt a thrilling roller coaster did not suit the style of attraction that they were looking for, and that local residents opposed a noisy roller coaster in the tranquility of the Blue Mountains National Park. Scenic World decided to invest in the new scenic cableway instead, as foreign visitors increased. However, the ride's mysterious nature has led to circulating urban legends about incidents such as sandbags being sent on the ride and never coming back. Today, parts of the Orphan Rocker have been removed, but much of the layout still stands around the park entrance and the bushland surrounding it. The ride will never open to the public. Sega World Sydney. Sega World Sydney was a short-lived indoor high-tech amusement park themed to the video game properties of Sega. It opened in 1997 in what is now Darling Harbour, hoping to capitalize on the crowds for the upcoming Sydney Olympics in 2000. Its rides and attractions heavily included screens and simulator technology, usually featuring an interactive element. There was one roller coaster at the park, themed after the video game Rail Chase. Manufactured by an obscure company named Masago Industrial, this coaster featured an interactive shooting element. Sega World closed in late 2000 after it failed to draw the expected crowds and break even on its investment. Sega bailed out on their shares in the park by 1999, and in 2001, the park's contents were mostly auctioned off, including Rail Chase being sold to a park in India where it still operates today. The building housing Sega World was demolished in 2008. Toboggan Hill Park. Toboggan Hill Park is the second of the parks on this level that still exists today, but doesn't get spoken about very much. Set in bushland in Nelson Bay to the north of Newcastle, the park is tucked away in a secluded location and often forgotten about. It features a 1-kilometer alpine slide, rock climbing, roller skating, bowling, mini golf, and a giant maze, among other attractions. Entry to the park is just $15, but ride tickets are purchased separately. There's not a lot more information about this park, like when it opened or anything, so if you're a Nelson Bay local, let us know about Toboggan Hill Park in the comments. Tops and Dazzleland Dragons. Several YouTube videos and social media posts and even news articles have discussed Brisbane and Adelaide locals' fond memories of two roller coasters that once existed in both cities' Maya Centre shopping malls. These were two custom Zamperla-powered coasters that featured as part of small amusement parks within the shopping centres. Brisbane's version was fondly known as the Dragon and operated at a park called Tops in the Maya Centre. This small amusement centre operated from the late 1980s until it was replaced by cinemas in 2001. The Dragon coaster travelled high above the lower floors of the shopping centre, with its supports attached to the columns of the mall itself. After removal, the famous Dragon train is said to have been repurposed into a train on wheels used for children's entertainment events, but it has now been scrapped. Adelaide's version was similar, based in Dazzleland, a family entertainment centre that occupied the top 2 floors of their Maya Centre in Rundle Mall. The powered coaster there was called the Blues Bullet and was music themed. It was removed in 1998 and its fate is unknown. Wobby's World. Wobby's World was a relatively popular family amusement park that operated from 1980 until the late 1990s in the suburb of Nunawading in Melbourne. The park mostly consisted of custom-made attractions themed to different modes of transport, including a helicopter monorail and a simulator ride, and various real forms of transport that guests could either ride on or drive themselves, including a fire engine, a tank, and bobcats. The park gained a reputation for being apparently quite dodgy and was even parodied by the TV sketch comedy series The Late Show and a series of mock ads referring to the park as Piss Week World. The park deteriorated and its operators elevated ticket prices to try to cover their costs, and its popularity dropped. It closed in 1999 and originally became a plant nursery, but the land today is occupied by a police station. Wonderland Sydney. Wonderland is certainly Australia's most famous defunct theme park. Opened in 1985, the park was operated by King's Entertainment Company, who later became Paramount Parks, the same operators who ran King's Island, King's Dominion, and Canada's Wonderland, among others at the time. Wonderland was Australia's largest theme park, featuring around 24 rides at its peak, including 3 roller coasters, the Bush Beast, which was a clone of Wild Beast and Grizzly at the other King's parks, the Beastie, a smaller family-friendly wooden coaster, and the Demon of Vekoma Boomerang. Other rides included an Intamin drop tower named the Space Probe, an inverting starship named Bounty's Revenge, a rapids ride named Snowy River Rampage, and a variety of rides themed to Hanna-Barbera cartoon properties. In 1997, the park was sold to Malaysia-based conglomerate the Sunway Group. Under Sunway's management, the park rapidly deteriorated. After years of no new attractions and rides closing or falling into disrepair, Wonderland closed in April 2004 and was demolished for industrial rezoning. A couple of its rides do still exist. Bounty's Revenge is at Sunway Lagoon in Malaysia, and the Demon is at Wonderla Amusement Park in Hyderabad, India. World Expo Park. World Expo Park was an amusement park built for Expo 88 held in Brisbane. The park was built on the site of what is now the Brisbane Convention and Exhibition Centre, designed as both a sideshow for visitors to the World Expo and as a showcase of some of the latest in theme park technology. The park included 3 coasters from Dutch manufacturer Vekoma: Titan, a boomerang which would relocate to Wonderland Sydney to become the Demon; Centrifuge, a rare suspended model known as the Swinging Turns, which relocated to Dreamworld in Bangkok; and Supernova, an indoor family coaster model which also went to Dreamworld. The park was intended to stay after the conclusion of the expo, but due to a lack of popularity, it closed after just months of operation. Let's move down to the mid-level of the iceberg now. These are things that you might have known, but are a little more obscure. Adventure World Castle Fire. On November 2nd, 2013, after an evening of their Fright Nights event, alongside celebrations of the opening of their brand new coaster IBIS, a fire broke out in Adventure World Perth's iconic fiberglass castle. This castle was a centerpiece of the park and quite iconic of the park for a long time. It even featured on the park's former logo. The fire is believed to have been attributed to a firecracker, as there were a lot of pyrotechnics involved in Fright Nights, and some of the fireworks for this and later Fright Nights events are believed to have been stored in the castle. The fire caused $500,000 of damages and completely gutted the castle, which had to be demolished shortly thereafter. To this day, there is nothing standing in the castle's place, merely a concrete slab where the icon of a park once stood. Atlantis Marine Park. Atlantis Marine Park was a theme park and dolphinarium built as part of a city development plan in 2 Rocks to the north of Perth. The signature attractions of the park were 7 bottlenose dolphins who were caught from the local coastal population and trained over the course of several years. The park also featured rides and other marine animal exhibits. The park faced difficulties over animal welfare when 3 dolphin calves were born at the park. New regulations required the park to expand their dolphin habitat to accommodate the 3 new dolphins. This led to the park facing financial difficulties and closing in 1990. Tragically, the park's dolphins were the ultimate victims in the situation, as the park handed them over to a research project to attempt to release and rewild them in order to avoid their financial obligation to the animals. The project to release the dolphins would result in several of their deaths. The park itself remained abandoned for a lengthy period of time, including the famous King Neptune statue, which still stands on the site today, now being a local landmark. Aragog the Spider. From 2001 to 2003, Warner Brothers Movie World played host to a Harry Potter exhibit named the Harry Potter Movie Magic Experience in the plot formerly occupied by the Young Einstein Gravity Homestead. The exhibit was originally themed after the first Harry Potter movie before being updated to reflect the Chamber of Secrets later in the attraction's run. The walkthrough experience saw guests taken along Diagon Alley and into Harry's dormitory at Hogwarts, and featured a real-life owl demonstration and special effects. In 2003, in an effort to keep up with the ongoing Warner Brothers releases, the exhibition was updated to The Matrix in anticipation of the upcoming sequels to the hit 1999 film. When the Harry Potter exhibition was removed, a large sculpture of Aragog, the gigantic spider from the films, was relocated to the Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster, where it was briefly visible in the dark during the Wild Mouse section. With Scooby-Doo down for renovations, Aragog has also briefly appeared as a photo opportunity during Fright Nights events. Blue Lagoon. Blue Lagoon was a themed water park that existed as part of Dreamworld from 1983 until the opening of Whitewater World in 2006. The park and slides were designed by John Longhurst himself, featuring a body slide, a terrain-based tube slide, and the infamous toboggan slide, a steep straight slide that would see riders skim across the surface of the splash pool. With the announcement of Whitewater World opening next door to the park, Dreamworld closed Blue Lagoon a few months before the new water park's opening, and the site has remained abandoned ever since. It's still visible on the northern end of Steel Taipan. The structure is largely overgrown and derelict. Only the tube slide remains on the site, with the other 2 slides having been removed at various points in time. To this day, Dreamworld have not announced any demolition plans, and the site of the volcano is often mistaken for another attraction at the park. Bullen's African Lion Safari. Bullen's African Lion Safari was a chain of safari parks operated by circus operator Stafford Bullen. The parks operated around the country and featured exotic animals that were part of the circuses and menageries owned by the Bullen family. Their most famous feature was the drive-through safari, which would allow guests to drive their own car through a large enclosure alongside lions and other big cats. The cats would interact with the vehicles, with some guests experiencing their cars being damaged when lions would pull off side mirrors, windscreen wipers, or even puncture tires. The parks were infamous for a number of high-profile incidents, most notably when a lioness escaped from the Warragamba Park near Sydney, eventually having to be shot after it killed a dog and terrified local residents. The parks all gradually closed over the course of the late 1980s and early 1990s after controversies surrounding animal welfare and safety. Today, the Warragamba Park serves as a sanctuary for retired animals from circuses and other forms of exploitative entertainment. The other parks around the country, including near Perth, Brisbane, and Melbourne, have been completely demolished and redeveloped. I actually have a video on the African Lion Safari Parks on the channel if you'd like to check it out. Dreamworld White Lions. From April to August 2011, Dreamworld was home to 2 white lions on loan from the National Zoo and Aquarium, while the zoo renovated their own facilities. For the display of the lions, Dreamworld constructed an entirely new exhibition space known as the Lair, adjacent to Tiger Island, and advertised the attraction very heavily. 2 different pairs of white lions were exhibited at the park for a short period each, before returning to their home in August 2011. After the lions' departure, the Lair was repurposed as an extension of Tiger Island from September, despite initial plans to display other animals at the park in the future. It remains possibly the most short-lived attraction in Dreamworld's history. Down Underland. Down Underland was an amusement park in the suburb of Watson on the outskirts of Canberra and was once home to the only permanent roller coaster in the history of the ACT. The coaster was an Alan Herschel model Wild Mouse and it operated from sometime in the 1990s until closing in the mid-2000s. The park was originally known as Canberra Fair and had a standard collection of basic transportable flat rides. The land was sold for a residential development, and while some sources state that the rides remain in storage with the hopes of reconstructing a new park on other land at some time in the future, 20 years later, it seems that those dreams may never become a reality. El Caballo Blanco. El Caballo Blanco was the name of 2 Andalusian-themed parks opened in Sydney and Perth in the 1970s. The parks were established around a dancing stallions show in which imported Spanish horses performed a choreographed show along with stunt riders. Other attractions at the park included miniature horses and a variety of rides, water slides, and even a small zoo. The parks were established by Ray Williams, who went on to establish a similar park at the Disneyland Resort in California. Unfortunately, Williams' death resulted in the parks winding down and ceasing operations. While there were some other Andalusian horse shows held at the El Caballo Blanco venues and at other parts of Sydney and Perth over the years since, the parks never reopened, and both have now been rezoned for residential developments. Fantasy Glades. Fantasy Glades was a bizarre theme park of sorts in Port Macquarie, New South Wales. Located in a rainforest setting, the park consisted of a variety of small displays and walk-through attractions themed to various fantasy and fairy tale stories. The centerpiece of the park was a large pink castle with life-sized mannequins on display, telling the story of Cinderella as you walk through. The park also featured a witch's cottage, a diamond mine that told the story of Snow White, and the old woman who lived in a shoe, alongside small rides like a pedal-powered monorail and this haunting dragon sculpture who permanently lives in my nightmares. It also featured on the album cover of Jaguar Mars' debut album, Howlin'. The park was opened by George and Rosemary Whitaker, a couple who both had a form of dwarfism. They sold the park to a new family in 1986, but unfortunately, due to the ill health of the new owners and financial concerns, the park closed down in 2002. Some remnants of the park remain on the site today, but the current owner is seeking to build eco-friendly accommodation on the land. Fluffy the Shark. Fluffy the Shark was a fiberglass shark that featured in the pool beneath Dreamworld's classic flat ride, the Wipeout. In its initial iteration, Wipeout featured a lagoon beneath the ride with water jets that would shoot towards riders during the cycle. In this lagoon, Fluffy circled beneath the ride, seemingly waiting for his prey to fall into the water. In 2007, due to water restrictions, Wipeout's lagoon was drained and Fluffy was relocated to a nearby garden bed in Ocean Parade, where he was put on display. That garden bed was removed in 2014 during construction of Tailspin, and Fluffy has not been seen since. Green Lantern derailment incident. On March 15th, 2015, a wheel mechanism broke on the Green Lantern coaster, causing a derailment of one of the cars. The car became stranded near one of the mid-course brake runs during the ride. Images emerged revealing that a large piece of the wheel assembly had actually fallen from the ride, landing in the grass beneath the queue area. Riders were rescued by Queensland Fire Services with no serious injuries, although one rider did complain of a pain in their ribs. Investigations revealed that there was a significant design flaw with S&S's wheel assembly, where a bolted joint being improperly designed broke under stress. The investigation determined that Movie World could not have prevented this part from breaking, and S&S redesigned that flawed component. Green Lantern remained closed to the public until reopening on December 16th that year. Hopkins and Pierce Wild Mouse relocations. Ted Hopkins and Dick Pierce built 3 wooden Wild Mouse coasters in the late 1950s and early 1960s based on designs they saw at the Seattle World's Fair. This Australian-made design is still in operation at Luna Park Sydney today, but the other 2 coasters were located at the showgrounds in Melbourne and Adelaide, operating for the annual agricultural shows. Despite being removed in 2003 and 2007 respectively, both coasters are actually still in operation at little-known parks in Indonesia. Melbourne's Mad Mouse initially moved to a park named Batu Night Spectacular before relocating again to Jawa Timur Park 2 nearby in Batu, where it operates today as the Animal Coaster. Meanwhile, Adelaide's model moved to a seaside park in Tuban, East Java called Wisata Bahari Lamongan, or WBL. It operates today as the Crazy Car Coaster. This makes the 3 Australian-made wooden Wild Mouse coasters also the only 3 wooden Wild Mouse coasters left in the world. Leisureland Fair. Leisureland Fair was an amusement park in the suburb of Langwarrin in Melbourne. Opening in 1984, it featured a variety of rides, including a steam train, which would transport guests from the car park to the park entrance. Other rides included a log flume, water slides, mini golf, and a large function center and picnic facilities. The park also featured a roller coaster custom built from designs that are believed to be by Japanese manufacturer Meisho. The park was short-lived, closing in 1992, with the majority of the park being demolished and turned into a housing estate. The function center, though, remains standing and was sold to a local mosque as a cultural center for the local Muslim community. It still remains standing and operating to this day. King Carnival. King's Carnival was a fun fair that existed on the foreshore of Mandurah near Perth for 70 years. The carnival started as a semi-permanent home for a collection of traveling rides in 1955, including a Ferris wheel, sideshows, and other carnival rides. Some of the rides would intermittently go on the traveling circuit before returning to Mandurah in their off-season. The Ferris wheel in particular became an iconic part of the skyline of Mandurah, sitting on the banks of the Mandurah estuary. Other rides in the carnival's later years included a carousel, dodging cars, and a few kids' rides. In 2025, the carnival closed permanently, with its rides being auctioned off. The owners could not gain a permanent lease on the land and decided, albeit sadly, that they could not continue to operate the carnival. Luna Park Melbourne Fire. While Luna Park Sydney's ghost train fire is well known and very frequently discussed, a much more forgotten incident occurred at the sister park in Melbourne just 2 years later. In 1981, an arsonist set fire to a sideshow game at Luna Park Melbourne, and the blaze quickly spread to the nearby Giggle Palace. The Giggle Palace was a fun house much in the same style as Luna Park Sydney's Coney Island, featuring barrels, shuffleboards, and other fun obstacles. Unfortunately, it was completely destroyed by the fire. The nearby river caves were also deemed to be unsafe following an inspection after the fire and were demolished as well. Fortunately, unlike the Sydney incident, the park was closed at the time of the Melbourne fire, so no one was injured. Magic Kingdom Landsvale. Magic Kingdom was a small amusement park that operated in the Sydney suburb of Landsvale from the 1970s to the 1990s. Many of its rides were sourced from Luna Park Sydney after it closed indefinitely in the aftermath of the ghost train fire. What this park is most famous for is the fact that it remained abandoned for quite a significant amount of time after its closure. The park closed shortly after the opening of Wonderland Sydney, reportedly because of struggling attendance. However, because the riverside land was very prone to flooding, development options were limited, and there still hasn't been anything built on the former site of the park. Remnants of the park, such as the giant slide and a model of the old woman's shoe, became popular with urban explorers after being abandoned. There are still some remnants of the park on the banks of Prospect Creek in Landsvale to this day. Old Sydney Town. Old Sydney Town was an open-air museum and theme park on the Central Coast, themed to the early years of Sydney during colonisation. The park featured recreations of historical buildings such as a barracks, a jail, a tavern, and even a recreation of early Sydney Harbour, as well as reenactments of various colonial-era sites such as convict punishments, military parades, and bush dances. The park opened in 1974, offering educational experiences to visitors on Australia's colonial heritage. After briefly passing into government hands, Old Sydney Town passed to the management of Warwick Amusements, who had ambitious plans to redevelop the site, including a full-scale theme park, a golf course, and an international hotel. However, Warwick Amusements ended up losing more than $1 million on the site, and it closed in 2003. Today, the site is still partly intact, other than a few buildings that have been destroyed by fire, and it's used for film production, including featuring in a 3-part episode of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Surf Rider location plans. Surf Rider, or as it is currently known, Flash Speed Force, first opened at Wet n Wild in 2007. It is a standard Intamin Surf Rider model, and for the duration of its time at Wet n Wild, it was the only dry mechanical ride in the park. This was initially rumored and eventually confirmed to be because the ride was initially purchased by VRTP for SeaWorld, quite possibly for the former site of the pirate ship. However, VRTP changed their minds for unknown reasons and instead installed the ride at Wet n Wild. The ride faced several technical difficulties at the water park, including excessive corrosion caused by the water mist effects that were added to the ride. Ultimately, VRTP then changed their minds again after Surf Rider's consistent technical issues, relocating the ride instead to Movie World, where it operates today as Flash Speed Force. Timbertown. Timbertown is an amusement park and open-air museum located in Wauchope on the mid-north coast of New South Wales. Opening in 1976, the park pays tribute to a colonial-era sawmiller's village, demonstrating the early machinery and techniques of the timber industry, which was a key part of the economy in the local area pre-Federation. Along with a heritage steam railway, the park features live demonstrations and real examples of steam machinery, cross-cut saws, horse and carriage rides, blacksmithing demonstrations, and gold panning. The park also formerly featured a real team of bullocks who would demonstrate how timber was transported via bullock before automobiles were invented and widely available. The park is seemingly little known, but quite well themed and authentic. It operates year-round on the Oxley Highway in Wauchope, not far from Port Macquarie. Tower of Terror brownouts. It is well documented that the Tower of Terror was a greatly complex ride for Dreamworld to operate, and these complexities and issues are part of the reason that the ride was eventually closed. But one of the lesser known facts is the ride's power consumption. When the ride was in operation, the launch mechanism would temporarily double the park's power usage for 6 to 7 seconds every time the ride launched to top speed. This enormous power draw is said to have occasionally caused brownouts elsewhere in the area. This is rumored to have been one of the reasons that Tower of Terror's launch speed was drastically reduced in later years. Combined with the added maintenance requirements with the extra strain on the car and tracks, the park made efforts to reduce the ride's power consumption by lowering the launch speed significantly, which is why the ride was slower and didn't go as high in its later years. Whistle Stop Park. Whistle Stop Park was an amusement park in the suburb of Skye near Frankston in Victoria. It operated in the 1960s and 1970s and was named after its signature steam railway. The park also featured a chairlift, pedal boats on a large ornamental lake, and go-karts. The park had around 14 individual rides, with the most popular being the narrow gauge steam railway, which ran through the bushland surrounding the park. The station for the railway was a replica of the heritage Walhalla station. The park's owner actually purchased copies of the real plans for the gold mining station and scaled them down to 3/4 of their original size. Unfortunately, the park only existed for around 10 years, and since it vanished in the 1970s, very few pictures exist. Today, the land has been subdivided, but Frankston City Council have built a park and playground on part of the former site, which includes tributes to the Whistle Stop amusement park. Wild West Falls fire. On the evening of December 5th, 2003, after park hours, a fire broke out in the structure of Wild West Falls at Movie World, starting in the final turntable room above the final drop. Movie World's own emergency response team were quickly on the scene along with fire crews. The ride sustained significant damage near the top of the lift hill, according to reports from the park. No one, however, was injured. Movie World managed to repair the structure of the ride and it was reopened by Boxing Day. However, multiple effects were never repaired during the final sequence, including an exploding barrel animatronic and smoke and wind effects that used to occur just before the final drop. To my knowledge, the cause of the fire was never officially made public, but it is believed to have been an electrical fault. Now let's move down to the obscure level of the iceberg. These are things that I think most people would not know about in the Australian amusement industry, but true enthusiasts might. African Safari World. In 2008, Village Roadshow Theme Parks presented a plan to replace the Werribee Open Range Zoo near Melbourne with a new theme park inspired by the likes of Disney's Animal Kingdom. Occupying 99 acres of land, the park was intended to feature thrill rides, roller coasters, restaurants, and African theming, as well as a redevelopment of the existing zoo. VRTP stated that the project would cost $220 million and would be expected to draw crowds of up to 1.3 million visitors every year. Some of the confirmed attractions for the project included a redeveloped safari to replace the open range zoo, water rides, a roller coaster that VRTP claimed would be Australia's greatest, and a 4D theatre. On June 1st that year, the Victorian government rejected the proposal on the basis that the project was anticipated to cost taxpayers up to $100 million. In the end, VRTP never went through with their planned purchase of Werribee Open Range Zoo. Geelong City Council had brief discussions with VRTP about the possibility of opening a theme park near Avalon Airport instead, but nothing came of those discussions. Australian Legends World. Australian Legends World was a proposed theme park project set to be built close to Metricon Stadium in Carrara on the Gold Coast. It was proposed by a Chinese investment group called the Songchen Group, who own and operate theme parks, resorts, and water parks across China. The park was set to feature historical performances, animal exhibits, and an indoor ski field, as well as a theatre, an adventure park, rides, and experiences. Concept art for the park shows a large reconstruction of Uluru at the park's entrance, water rides, and much more. The project was controversial as a part of China's Belt and Road Initiative, an investment strategy by the Chinese government to build relations in foreign countries and boost their global trade, which has previously raised some security concerns within Australia. The park plan also featured other investments from the Chinese firm, such as a 25-story high-rise development, but in the end, the plan was abandoned. Dreamworld Creature Cruise. From 1997 to 2000, Dreamworld featured a mostly forgotten ride known as the Creature Cruise. The ride was situated in the northern portion of what was then Village Oval, around where Kenny's Forest Flyer stands today. It was a slow boat ride that took guests past around 140 handmade sculptures of exotic animals. The ride also traveled into an enclosure where the park's baby cougars were housed at the time. There is not much footage or information about the ride remaining today, but users on the park's forums reported that the boats on the ride had severe technical difficulties, including balance issues that resulted in capacity being limited. After a couple of years, the ride was converted into a walk-through attraction, with the boats being scrapped and the animals placed through a simple pathway. The attraction completely closed in 2000. Dreamworld walk-through attractions. Throughout the 2000s, Dreamworld featured a variety of temporary themed walk-through scare attractions developed by a company called Sudden Impact Entertainment. Each of the attractions lasted just a few months at most. The first was The Mummy Returns, themed to the Brendan Fraser movie, which operated from June to July 2001. Another attraction themed to Lara Croft Tomb Raider operated from December 2003 to April 2004. The Mummy returned with another scare attraction entitled Tomb of the Dragon Emperor Live between September 2008 and January 2009. But the most bizarre of these attractions was Nightmares. Operating between Boxing Day 2006 and July 2007 after being extended due to its popularity, Nightmares was a two-part scare maze with live actors. It was located near Blue Lagoon in a temporary tent and featured two different experiences named Freezer and Angoscia. Limited information is available as photos were not permitted inside the maze, but Parkz users described goofy 3D creatures, live actors, and something called a gravity tunnel. Pretty strange. Eureka Mountain Mine Ride reopening plans. During the demolition of Gold Rush Country, Dreamworld conducted a survey of the condition of the Eureka Mountain Mine Ride with plans of actually restoring and reopening the ride. The mountain around the ride was demolished in late 2017, but the structure of the ride remained standing while Dreamworld and external inspectors examined the structure and considered the feasibility of reopening the ride. Eureka Mountain had been standing but not operating since 2006 at the time. Ultimately, the inspections determined that it would not be feasible to reopen the ride, partly due to the condition of the track and partly due to the ride's weird support structure, which had been heavily modified during construction to incorporate the mountain. The remainder of the track was then demolished by the end of 2017, but for a brief period of time, the ride structure was standing and completely visible with no mountain facade, and Dreamworld genuinely intended on potentially reopening the ride. Granty's Maze. Granty's Maze is a bizarre fun park located in Gerringong near Kiama in New South Wales, which became the focus of some attention after the owner was ordered to dismantle dozens of rides that were deemed to be unsafe. Owner John Grant claims to have over 80 rides and attractions at the park, if you include such rides as Centipede, Squirrel Car, Treadmill Scooter, Coin-Operated Small, and Giant Chess. The park is best known for its tire maze, the only one in the world, and admittedly also does feature some fun attractions like a 360-degree swing, paddle boats, and a giant slide. But the park's bizarre nature came under real scrutiny in late 2024 when the park's feud with the local council went public. The council stated that the majority of the rides at the park were materially unsafe, but John was having none of it, speaking to ABC News and posting on social media about how unfairly he was being treated. There is no word on whether the attractions have been removed, but needless to say, this place and its owners are quite strange. Grant Telfer. Grant Telfer was a South Australian engineer who is responsible for perhaps Australia's most unique roller coaster designs. These designs are human-powered, and the largest and most famous exists at Green Valley Farm today. Telfer designed these coasters along with a massive collection of swings, rides, slides, and playground equipment, originally for his own park in Monash, South Australia. This park was open to the public for free and featured a massive collection of homemade human-powered rides. Tragically, it closed in the early 1990s due to rising insurance premiums. However, several of Telfer's roller coaster designs were incorporated into parks and playgrounds around the state and even further around the country, including at the St Kilda Adventure Playground, Puzzle Park in Murray Bridge, and eventually at Green Valley Farm. The only other Telfer coaster that still exists is at Don Mosley Playground in Keith, South Australia. These steel contraptions involve riders pushing the train to the top of the hill before boarding themselves and letting gravity do the rest. I have a full video documenting Grant Telfer's roller coaster designs on the channel that I highly recommend you check out. And yes, commenter, they are roller coasters. If you want to join the fight against misinformation that denigrates the great Keith Monorail, join the Keith Monorail Army. We fight for the truth that the Keith Monorail is the greatest roller coaster of all time. A big thank you to the Keith Monorail Army and to General Scaretastic YT. Lassiter's Lost Mine. Lassiter's Lost Mine was the predecessor to Bermuda Triangle at SeaWorld, consisting of the same ride system but a different theme. The ride system was designed in-house by SeaWorld with the assistance of several third-party contractors, and Lassiter's Lost Mine opened to the public in 1987. It took riders on an adventure into a mine which would then flood. Scenes throughout the ride depicted miners trying to escape the slow flooding. This was the original purpose of the famous flooding room from the ride, which was the climactic scene of Lassiter's, depicting the mine becoming completely flooded as riders escaped. While the ride was a success, SeaWorld were ambitious to take the theming to the next level, and it was renovated to become Bermuda Triangle, which opened to the public in 1994. Today, the show building houses the station and splashdown of Storm Coaster. Motor Coaster and Arkham Asylum VR. Two of the Gold Coast roller coasters briefly featured virtual reality experiences during their lifetimes. At Dreamworld, Motor Coaster offered a VR experience called Skyrider, which turned the ride into a science fiction story, sending riders on a mission to defend Earth. The experience first opened in late 2016, but was not well received due to the bizarre theming that didn't match with Motor Coaster in real life. Around the same time, Arkham Asylum at Movie World launched a VR experience as well. Unlike Dreamworld's, the VR experience on Arkham Asylum was custom designed to fit the Arkham theme, starring the Joker and Harley Quinn. While the VR itself was better received, there were complaints over the roughness of the ride, making it uncomfortable when riders could not see in order to brace themselves. Regardless, the VR option remained as an upcharge at the ride until it ceased operations in 2019. Other Luna Parks. Alongside Luna Park in Sydney and Melbourne, 3 other Australian capital cities have had theme parks named Luna Park throughout their history. Adelaide's is obviously the most famous of the 3, with Luna Park Glenelg operating from 1930 to 1934 as the predecessor to Luna Park Sydney, but the other 2 are much lesser known. In Perth, a Luna Park was briefly opened by a man named Lionel Morris at Cottesloe Beach in the 1920s before the park then moved to Scarborough. Luna Park Scarborough operated from 1939 to 1972, featuring a very off-putting copy of the classic face entrance that was all blue. That park featured a collection of classic flat rides and sideshows, but it was closed in the early 1970s after a tumultuous and controversial history and replaced with a shopping centre. In Brisbane, meanwhile, a park named Luna Park operated at Redcliffe from 1944 until 1966. It was home to a Ferris wheel and other flat rides, a steam train, sideshows, and more. The park was actually run under what's called a municipal license from the town council, and therefore it was exempt from local taxes. But it was relatively unsuccessful, and it changed ownership several times before closing to be replaced by a car park and basic park facilities. Pokemon Island Adventure. As documented brilliantly by my good friend Mr. Yum Yum, go and check that video out, Pokemon Island Adventure was a short-lived attraction at Movie World that opened in 1999 to celebrate the release of the first Pokemon movie. It was a walkthrough attraction which took guests on an adventure and encouraged them to spot as many different Pokemon as they possibly could. The attraction was actually located outside the park in the adjacent film studios, and guests would be ferried out to the attraction via studio trams. The experience was accompanied by a Pokemon gift shop adjacent to the entrance to the Kids WB area. The attraction was incredibly short-lived, lasting just a month and a half at the park, and very little documentation about it exists today. I highly recommend giving Mr. Yum Yum's video a watch. He does a great job uncovering as much information as possible about this weird attraction. Random Rocky Hollow Log Ride theming. Rocky Hollow Log Ride was a staple of Dreamworld from opening day until its closure in 2020. The ride had a vague colonial theme, but largely was simply a basic log flume with no real storyline. However, there were a few theming elements scattered along the ride for a while, and they were bizarre. Some of these elements included whimsical fairy-style mushrooms and toadstools along the side of the flume. But most bizarre of all was a large Triceratops sculpture located inside one of the ride's tunnels. To this day, I cannot find any source of where the dinosaur came from, why it was there, or when it was removed. It was just there. Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster No Theming Era. This is actually an entry on the Iceberg that I've experienced myself, but I haven't really heard anyone talk about it ever since. Maybe we're all traumatized and don't want to remember it. Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster underwent a renovation in 2018, which included a massive overhaul of the ride's theming. However, what you might not remember is that from late 2016 until the ride eventually closed for that renovation in late 2017, the theming was completely stripped out of the ride. This is believed to have been because of a particular type of foam that was used in constructing the interior walls around the theming, which no longer met Movie World's self-enforced fire safety standards. The ride operated with temporary fencing replacing the walls for almost a year before it underwent its renovation from late 2017 until 2018, reopening as Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster Next Generation. SeaWorld Eye and Starflyer. SeaWorld has previously featured two observation rides in a temporary capacity at the park. The more famous of the two was the SeaWorld Eye, a 60-meter Ferris wheel that stood at the park from 2006 to 2008. Contrary to popular belief, this was actually a permanent model Ferris wheel that stood on the current site of Ray Reef. However, complaints from nearby residents about obstruction of the skyline resulted in the Ferris wheel having to be removed after just 2 years at the park. But even more bizarrely, in the summer of 2018, SeaWorld installed a temporary portable model Starflyer attraction on the former site of the iconic Rescue Point Lighthouse, which had stood at the park since its opening in 1972. The iconic structure was demolished to make way for this transportable model Starflyer that operated very briefly at the park before being removed in preparation for the development of the new Atlantis. It is theorized that the Starflyer was brought in as a test to see if a more permanent installation would be popular and whether it would operate effectively in SeaWorld's windy conditions, a theory which does make sense considering that Trident was installed as part of the new Atlantis just a few years later. SeaWorld Wild Exhibit. In early 2013, SeaWorld began cryptic teasers for Storm Coaster and another attraction known simply as Wild. This advertising campaign continued up to the point that after Storm Coaster was confirmed to be a marked water coaster, a billboard was placed outside the upcoming construction zone which teased Storm Coaster for spring 2013 alongside Wild coming in 2015 with an image that shows gorillas, crocodiles, hippos, and a jungle background. Storm Coaster indeed opened in 2013, but the Wild attraction never eventuated. SeaWorld did open Creatures of the Deep in 2015, a two-part exhibition that displayed animatronics of mythical, prehistoric, and real-life marine creatures, but that's obviously a huge deviation from gorillas, crocodiles, and hippos. It has never been confirmed to this day what exactly SeaWorld were originally teasing on that billboard, but it never happened. Storm Coaster original location plans. Speaking of Storm Coaster, the Mark Water Coaster project at SeaWorld has also changed many times, and it was never intended to be the replacement for Bermuda Triangle. Plans for a water coaster at SeaWorld were first released by the Gold Coast City Council back in 2008, while Bermuda Triangle was still in operation. Those plans showed that SeaWorld's original plan was to construct the water coaster at the front of the park. The ride station would have been constructed where Penguin Encounter is today, with the ride's layout stretching outside the park over the car park. Those plans were shelved when SeaWorld decided instead to construct Jet Rescue, and the Mark Water Coaster concept was revived in 2012 after SeaWorld finally demolished Bermuda Triangle, which had been dormant for 2 years by that stage. White City, Sydney and Perth. White City was a popular name and style of amusement park in the early 20th century, much like Luna Park or Electric Park. These common style of amusement parks typically featured a shoot the chutes ride, a roller coaster or scenic railway, a midway, a Ferris wheel, games, and a pavilion with an architectural style that was inspired by the World's Expo in Chicago in 1893. While the White City Park spawned in the United States and the United Kingdom primarily, Australia had 2 White City parks of our own, located in Sydney and Perth. Perth's White City existed on the foreshore between World War I and the end of the 1920s, and was often referred to as Ugly Land due to its association with events organized by a group called the Ugly Men's Association. It was closed after public complaints over unruly behavior in the park. Today, the former site of that park holds the Supreme Court Gardens. Sydney's was the more traditional of the two, featuring a scenic railway, as well as the only PTC product ever to be exported from the United States, a carousel, which still operates at Luna Park, Melbourne today. It operated from 1913 to 1917 before being severely damaged in a fire and never reopening. It was replaced by a tennis stadium, which was then demolished in 2022. And finally, we move to the final level of the iceberg. These are the things that I believe are the most obscure and that the fewest people would know about, and that I find the most mysterious and fascinating. Big Banana animatronic bunyip. The Big Banana in Coffs Harbour is already a bizarre fun park in its own right, but up until the mid-2000s, it used to feature a strange attraction with a very big mystery behind it. The Big Banana's so-called monorail ride was actually a train that rode on a 2-beam concrete track around the park, making it, by definition, not a monorail. The tracks linked together various display buildings and went up this slope of the banana plantation. It gave guests a scenic and educational tour of the plantation as a whole. At one stage, late in the ride, the tracks passed by a lagoon, where an animatronic bunyip would rise out of the water. Very few photos or videos of the bunyip exist today, as it was shut off in 2005 due to budget constraints, but it is remembered to be a truly terrifying thing to behold. And even more terrifying is that despite conflicting reports, the bunyip is widely believed to have just been left abandoned at the bottom of the lagoon because the park had really no reason to go to all of the effort of removing it. Later in 2005, an incident occurred where a broken down train was being pushed by another train towards the maintenance bay when a coupling broke and the broken down train rolled freely, derailed, and fell into the lagoon. This led to the monorail being closed permanently. At least one of the 2 remaining trains was auctioned off in 2022, while carriages from some of the other trains have been held in storage at the park for quite some time, but the bunyip remains a total mystery. Could it still be at the bottom of the lagoon? Demon to Luna Park Melbourne rumors. When World Expo Park was closed to the public in late 1988, the vast majority of its rides, still essentially brand new, were sold to other parks around the world. The Vekoma Boomerang, then named Titan, ended up reopening at Wonderland Sydney as the Demon in 1992. But in the 4 years in between, it is rumored to be the case that a completely different deal was planned for the ride to be relocated to Luna Park, Melbourne. The ride would have taken the place of the old Big Dipper, which was demolished in 1989 because it required a significant amount of its wood to be replaced. For unknown reasons, this deal fell through, and the ride went to Wonderland instead. Doomsday Tower. In 2012, Movie World released a guest research survey with concept art for an attraction called the Doomsday Tower. This ride would have been placed in Superman's Helix, where Flash Speed Force is today, and it would have been a tower ride similar in design to a Huss Condor. Movie World stated the height of the attraction to be 145 meters, making it 25 meters taller than the Dreamworld Tower. The ride was set to feature a low-speed scenic mode and a high-speed mode for thrill seekers. Obviously, this ride never came to be, unfortunately. Dracula's Cabaret Restaurant Coaster. In 2004, Dracula's Cabaret Restaurant on the Gold Coast released a newsletter bragging that they were going to open a roller coaster that cost around $1 million Australian dollars. Rumors swirled about what this roller coaster would be, whether it be a simple, transportable, small kiddie coaster model such as a silly serpent installed somewhere in the restaurant, or if there were plans to make something bigger. Ultimately, it never happened. Dracula's would eventually open their haunted house attraction in Surfers Paradise, which was popular for quite some time, but as for what those roller coaster plans were, I guess we'll never know. Expo 88 Alien Encounters Fire. World Expo Park was home not only to its 3 Vekoma roller coasters that we've already talked about, but several other rides, including a dark ride called Alien Encounters, which operated from the expo's opening until it was actually destroyed by a fire in June 1988. Very little information about the ride itself is available, apart from a recount by user Mickey D on the Parkz forums, who recalls their experience on the ride, describing scenes such as dinosaur heads that shot flames at the riders, snakes hanging from a slimy tunnel, and a crashed spaceship set. In June 1988, the ride was engulfed by flames in what was described as an electrical fault, although the circumstances are somewhat suspicious, as this is reported to have been the second fire to have occurred within the ride, with the first occurring during its construction. Regardless, the ride was destroyed, with some of its murals being salvaged and relocated to the queue of Supernova for the remainder of World Expo Park's existence. Gumbaya World Exploding Pheasant. The entrance to Gumbaya World on the M1 to the east of Melbourne is marked by a giant statue of a pheasant. On October 26, 2011, a man was arrested after detonating an explosive and destroying the rear end of the pheasant at the front of what was then known as Gumbaya Park. The act of vandalism caused $50,000 worth of damage to the one-of-a-kind sculpture, blasting off the bird's butt and shattering the concrete structure of its body and neck. It was, luckily, later repaired. But we're not just talking about a simple firecracker prank either, because allegedly, the explosion was large enough to trigger faults in the park's security alarm system. The bizarre incident happened after a string of crimes and break-ins at Gumbaya Park, including an earlier incident where 3 go-karts were stolen from the park and taken on a joyride before being caught 15 kilometers away from the park. Problematic SBF Tower Coaster. Australia's travelling circuit was briefly home to one of the rarest and most bizarre roller coaster models ever to grace a funfair. The SBF Visa Tower Coaster is a strange model that was only ever built once. It operated on the European circuit as Cool and Fresh before making its move to operate in Australia for the 2013 and 2014 seasons, operating under the name FUNFAIR. The ride consists of a P-shaped vertical lift and beyond vertical drop, followed by a vertical loop, after which the ride turns 180 degrees and heads back to the station. It seats riders in a single 4-across row. Its time in Australia was quite disastrous, with the ride making news headlines after a stoppage where riders had to be evacuated just days into the Sydney Royal Easter Show, and as technical issues continued, it would only operate for a few days out of the entire show. After its time in Australia, it was sold to Wonderland Eurasia, a new massive scale theme park project in Turkey. And that's a whole other mystery in itself, because that park never opened and is still standing there completely abandoned to this day, including the SBF Tower Coaster. SeaWorld Hippo Attraction. In 2007, it was widely reported that SeaWorld would open an attraction featuring hippos on display. The exhibit was supposed to be constructed on the site where Ray Reef stands today. The exhibit was discussed in news articles and a guest survey about potential future attractions, and sources indicated that the attraction was actually confirmed in SeaWorld's plans for some time before being abandoned, for reasons unknown. That's all we know. Tasmania's first and only roller coaster. Almost every Australian state and territory has had a roller coaster at some point in its history. All but 3 of them have one currently, and the ACT had Down Underland, which was already discussed in this video. But Tasmania had a roller coaster too, and records of it are incredibly scarce. Serendipity Fun Park opened near Devonport in 1988 and only operated for around 16 months. Among its attractions were flat rides, bumper boats, and a Wild Mouse style roller coaster. The low quality images and lack of footage make it nearly impossible to confirm a manufacturer, but it certainly appears to have been a steel Wild Mouse coaster. The coaster's fate after the sudden closure of the park is also unknown, but this leaves the Northern Territory as the only state or territory never to have had a permanent roller coaster. And that wraps up this iceberg. Of course, there's infinite amounts of knowledge that I've probably missed, so feel free to leave your obscure Australian theme park facts and information in the comments below. I'd love to learn something that I didn't already know from you guys. I'm sure you guys have some amazing theme park knowledge. Drop it in the comments and maybe I'll include it in a future video. Before we go, I want to give a shout out to a Discord member @Wuffanuk on Discord. Wuffanuk contacted Crystal Mountain in New Zealand and confirmed for us that the ride was purchased directly brand new from L&T Systems. Thanks for your message, Wuffanuk. It's great to get some clarity on where this little coaster came from. Someone should hit up RCDB and let them know. It's a bizarre little ride, that's for sure. On another note, I wonder what compelled them to approach L&T out of all manufacturers when they decided to get a coaster. There must not be another L&T coaster within 10,000 kilometers. Thank you so much for watching and for being a supporter of my channel. If you'd like to be featured in my next video, you can leave a comment, send a message in my Discord, linked in the description, or you can send me something in the mail. My PO box details are on the screen now. For now, this is Maloney's Coasters from the tip of the iceberg, reminding you to be kind to one another, have a lovely day, and keep gaining credits. Bye.